The snowstorm hit Willow Creek like a freight train, howling through the sleepy town with a force unseen in 2 decades. Tommy Mitchell, a 5-year-old boy with eyes wide from wonder and fear, stood in his backyard as the world around him disappeared into a white abyss. The wind shrieked, and the snow, which had started gently enough, became a furious beast that swallowed everything. Tommy's small frame struggled to keep his footing as he wandered away from the warmth of the house, mesmerized by the endless blanket of white. His mother, Sarah, had called for him to come inside, but the winds had swallowed her voice. The house was no longer his safe haven. The world outside had taken on a new, terrifying rhythm. He followed the trail of rabbit tracks, new patterns that spoke to him louder than anything else. It was as if the chaos of the storm had given the snow a purpose, a call to be explored. The tracks led him deeper into the woods, his small red mittens offering little protection against the biting cold. Tears froze on his face as he stumbled, each step taking him farther from safety. "Mommy, I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible beneath the roar of the storm. Welcome to HeartForce channel, where you and I find more meaning in life through stories about dogs. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you're listening to this video from. And if you have any stories about your dog, feel free to share them with everyone. Then, in the midst of swirling white, a shape appeared, a massive figure breaking through the storm's madness. It was a German shepherd, its fur graying around the muzzle, its eyes full of silent understanding. Max, a dog who had lived alone since the passing of his owner, seemed to emerge from nowhere. Yet in that moment, it was as though he had been waiting for Tommy all along. Max approached with the grace of a protector, not hesitant but sure. With a low whimper, Tommy reached out, and the dog pressed his warm body against the shivering child, becoming a living shield against the storm's rage. For the first time that day, Tommy felt a deep, undeniable warmth, more than physical. It was the kind that melts away the cold of the world. The blizzard raged on, but Max stayed by Tommy's side. Where others saw a cold, unrelenting storm, Tommy felt the presence of something far stronger, unseen, unspoken, but undeniably there. In Max's calm, steady presence, the wild storm outside seemed just a little bit less threatening. The world didn't have to make sense. Not right now. Max was enough. The next morning, the storm passed, leaving behind a scene so silent, so still, it felt like the whole world had been paused. Sarah Miller found herself standing in the sterile hospital hallway, her mind racing with questions and gratitude. She had just watched her son sleep peacefully for the first time in months, his small chest rising and falling in the rhythm of rest, the kind that only comes when one feels safe. The past few years have been a whirlwind of struggles for Sarah. At 42, she had faced more than most could bear. Her husband, Mark, had disappeared 2 years ago. The official report said it was a boating accident, but with no body recovered, the questions lingered, unanswered. Sarah, a waitress at Mason's Diner and an accountant at Johnson Partners, worked double shifts to keep everything together. She didn't have time for herself, let alone the luxury of grieving. Tommy's special needs were a constant, the weight of it pulling at her, making her feel more isolated than ever. And yet, here, in the sterile quiet of the hospital, something unexpected had happened. A dog, Max, had shielded her son from the storm. He had kept Tommy alive in a blizzard that would have claimed his life otherwise. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a lifeline. And yet, he was more of a mystery than a hero. Sarah's eyes flickered to the hospital parking lot, where Max still sat, staring into the distance. He had become a fixture in Tommy's recovery, a silent guardian who never strayed far. The hospital staff didn't know what to make of him. He had no records, no known owners. The shelter had no records of him, and James Thompson, the elderly farmer who had reportedly cared for him, had passed away months ago. Max, Tommy had whispered in his sleep the night before, his small hand reaching out as if searching for something. "He knows me, Mom. He knows me like Dad did." Sarah shivered at the words. There was something in them, something that struck her deep. Tommy had always been different. His mild autism made it hard for him to connect, to communicate. He lived in a world of patterns and repetition. He didn't ask for much, but sometimes the world didn't make sense to him. His father's disappearance had shaken him in ways no one had fully understood. The boy who once quietly arranged his food into neat patterns now retreated further into himself, struggling to make sense of the chaos that life had thrown at him. But Max had brought something different. He didn't try to fix Tommy's world. He didn't try to make it normal. He simply understood it. He offered something more valuable than all the explanations in the world, a deep, unwavering connection that didn't require words or patterns to make sense of it. Max had been there when no one else had been, and Sarah knew that their lives had already been changed forever. The days following Tommy's miraculous rescue were quiet, yet filled with an undercurrent of change. Max, the dog who had saved Tommy's life, was no longer just a protector. He had become a constant presence in their world, a part of their fragile new routine. The transformation was subtle at first, unnoticed by the community, but deeply felt within the walls of Sarah's home. Tommy, who had once retreated into a world of isolation, began to open up. His anxiety, which had been a constant shadow, started to wane. At school, he no longer sat alone during lunch breaks. His lunch tray arranged with perfect geometric precision. Now, other children sought him out, drawn by his quiet intensity and, strangely, Max's presence. The dog sat beside him, the same way he had sat beside Tommy in the hospital room, offering the kind of comfort no words could convey. Sarah noticed it first at the breakfast table. Tommy, usually so meticulous with his food, now paused. He looked at Max, who lay quietly at his feet, and then reached out, offering him a piece of toast. Max's tail thumped once, a silent acknowledgement, and Tommy's eyes brightened. "He knows me, Mom," he said, his voice soft but certain. Max, for all his imposing size, had a way of making Tommy feel seen, something Sarah had never been able to fully do. She wasn't a trained therapist, after all. She wasn't equipped to understand the patterns Tommy built around himself. But Max didn't need patterns. He simply understood Tommy's world as it was. There was no right or wrong, just presence. It wasn't long before Tommy began to open up more at school. Miss Henderson, his kindergarten teacher, was the first to notice. She had long observed Tommy's behavior, noting his impressive memory and his need for structure. But it was Max who brought out the best in him. During reading time, Tommy, who had once struggled to keep up with his peers, now seemed to thrive. He raised his hand, his voice steady as he answered questions, and when he faltered, Max was there, his head resting gently on Tommy's lap, grounding him when the world around him seemed too overwhelming. The other children, who had once avoided Tommy or made him the target of whispered taunts, began to see him in a new light. Max, the dog that had saved Tommy in the storm, was now the dog that brought people together. Sophie Weber, a shy girl who had been unable to speak since her mother's car accident, found her voice through Max. She began to sit with Tommy during lunch, her fingers tracing the patterns of his food as they shared stories about their pets. Sophie, who had once lived in a world of silence, now spoke with a quiet confidence. Billy Winchester, the boy who had once taunted Tommy with cruel jabs, found himself growing uneasy in the presence of Max. It was almost as if the dog could sense the tension in Billy's heart, his sharp eyes never leaving him when he made snide comments. Billy, though initially resistant, couldn't deny that there was something about Max that calmed the others, something about the dog that brought peace. One day, during recess, Billy tried to push Tommy down again, a cruel act he had done many times before. But this time Max was there, stepping between the two boys, a living wall of muscle and determination. Billy faltered, taken aback by the dog's protective stance. "Max just wants me to be safe," Tommy said, his voice quiet but filled with conviction. Sarah watched the events unfold from a distance, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and relief. She had never imagined that a dog, a creature so often misunderstood in her own life, would become the one to teach her son about courage, about standing up for himself in a world that seemed too big to navigate. Max wasn't just helping Tommy. He was helping everyone around him, even Billy. At home, Sarah found herself growing closer to Tommy as well. The gaps in their relationship, created by fear and misunderstanding, slowly began to heal. She saw the boy she had raised, but now he was different, stronger, more confident, more able to express his feelings. It wasn't perfect. There were still the quiet moments of isolation, the times when Tommy retreated back into his world of patterns and numbers. But now, Max was always there, a comforting presence at his side, pulling him back into the world when he drifted too far. One night, as Sarah tucked Tommy into bed, he spoke again of Max, his voice soft and dreamy. "Max knows me, Mom. He knows me better than anyone else." His words lingered in the room, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah didn't feel so alone in her journey. Max had brought them something they never thought possible: healing. He had bridged a gap in Sarah's heart, a gap that had been formed when Mark had disappeared. And it seemed as though Max had been sent to heal the broken pieces that no one else could touch. Life in Willow Creek had begun to shift in ways that no one could have predicted. The once quiet town, where everyone knew each other's business, was now alive with whispers, not the kind that used to fuel gossip at Mason's Diner, but the kind that spoke of change, of healing, and of a bond between a boy and a dog that no one could ignore. Max's presence at the school was becoming a source of both hope and tension. While the children embraced him, and his bond with Tommy deepened, there were others who questioned whether it was truly safe. Principal Victoria Andrews, who had long been a pillar of the community, found herself at the center of a storm she hadn't anticipated. "We can't make exceptions based on emotional appeals," she had told the school board, her voice steady but cold. "This is a school, not a therapy center. What happens when other parents demand the same thing for their children?" Her argument was clear. Max, despite his miraculous rescue of Tommy, was a risk to the orderly functioning of the school. Sarah sat in the back of the meeting, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. She could feel the judgment in the room, the unspoken fear that Max represented something dangerous, something unpredictable. It wasn't just about a dog. It was about what he symbolized, a challenge to the norm. "I understand your concerns." Dr. Patricia Chin, Tommy's physician, had spoken up in defense of the dog. "But what we've seen with Tommy's progress is undeniable. Max has not only kept Tommy calm during his moments of distress, but has helped him integrate into the social dynamics of school in a way we never thought possible." Sarah's heart had swelled with pride at those words, but she knew it wasn't enough. The resistance was growing stronger, and it wasn't just at school. Everywhere she turned, she saw the walls closing in, whispers at the diner, sideways glances from parents at the grocery store, and the increasing discomfort in the faces of those who had once been her friends. It was the kind of division that cuts deep, creating a rift that no amount of kindness could easily mend. It was as if, in welcoming Max into their lives, they had disrupted something fundamental in Willow Creek. Some called it progress, others called it chaos. The town was torn in two, and Sarah was caught in the middle, desperately trying to hold on to her son's newfound sense of peace while fighting for Max's place in their world. One afternoon, as Sarah sat at the diner, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. Bob, the manager, had been unusually quiet since the controversy started. Now, he leaned in, his expression serious. "Sarah, I've been hearing things," he said, his voice low. "Customers are worried about the dog. They're afraid he's a liability." Her stomach sank. "I can't control what people think, Bob, but I know what I've seen. I've seen Tommy change. I've seen him find a way to connect with the world." Bob sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get it, but people are talking, and it's not just about Max anymore. It's about you too. Some of the regulars are saying you're not focused, that you're distracted. That dog, he's causing a stir. I've got to listen to the customers, Sarah." Sarah's eyes burned with frustration, but she knew better than to argue. "I'm doing what I have to for Tommy. And for Max. I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't stop now." The weight of it all, of the whispers of the judgment, of the unspoken accusations, was becoming unbearable. Yet, Sarah found herself more determined than ever. This wasn't just about a dog. It was about standing up for her son, for his future, for the peace he had found in Max. She couldn't let them tear that away. And then, just when it seemed that everything was falling apart, Max proved yet again that he was far more than just a dog. It happened on the playground during recess when a group of children started to gather around Tommy. They had started to accept him, to see beyond his differences, to include him in their games. But it was Billy Winchester, the boy who had tormented Tommy since the beginning, who was still unsure. Billy's words were cruel, as usual. "Weird kid with no dad. You think that dog can fix you?" He taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. But before Tommy could retreat into his old patterns, before he could hide himself away in his world of order and repetition, Max moved. The German shepherd, calm but unyielding, stepped forward, placing himself between Tommy and Billy. The protective stance, so familiar to Tommy, was now shared with the others. Billy stopped in his tracks, his face frozen in surprise. Max didn't growl. He didn't bark. He simply stood, watching with steady eyes, making it clear that anyone who wanted to harm Tommy would have to get past him first. For the first time in his life, Billy didn't feel brave enough to challenge Tommy. He turned and walked away, his steps slow and reluctant. Tommy looked up at Max, his heart racing, but his voice steady. "Thanks, Max." In that moment, something shifted, not just in Tommy, but in the others as well. It was a quiet victory, one that no one had expected. Billy Winchester, the boy who had once taunted Tommy, had been forced to see the truth. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a protector, a force to be reckoned with. And more than that, Max had just shown them all what it meant to stand up for someone else. The days grew colder as the battle over Max intensified. What had started as a simple act of heroism, Max rescuing Tommy from the blizzard, had snowballed into something far more complicated. The once peaceful town of Willow Creek was now a battleground of opinions, where emotions ran high and the truth was twisted to fit different narratives. At school, Max had become a symbol of both hope and contention. On the one hand, children like Tommy had flourished under his quiet, unwavering presence. But on the other hand, the school's administration, led by Principal Victoria Andrews, had grown increasingly uncomfortable with Max's role. What had begun as a compassionate gesture to help one child had transformed into a movement that threatened to shake the foundation of the community. Sarah knew the stakes had risen when she received a letter from the school board. It was a formal notice stating that Max's presence at the school was under review. They were questioning the legality of his status as a service dog and considering banning him from campus entirely. Sarah's heart sank as she read the words. Her son's emotional lifeline was at risk. That night, she sat in the kitchen, the letter in her hands, the weight of it pressing down on her chest. Tommy was upstairs, playing quietly with Max, oblivious to the storm that was brewing. He had no idea that the one constant in his life, his protector, his friend, was now being treated as a threat. She clenched her fists. She knew the argument against Max. They called him a risk. They said he was disruptive, that his presence at school created an unsafe environment. But Sarah also knew the truth. Max was a force for good. He had saved Tommy's life, and now he was helping him learn to navigate the world, to be a child who belonged, who wasn't afraid. And in doing so, he had helped others too. But there was a problem no one seemed to want to address: fear. Fear of what was different, fear of change. Fear that a dog, a living, breathing animal, had become a bridge to healing when no one else could see it. Fear of breaking the status quo. Fear of what it might mean if Max was allowed to stay. The next school board meeting was set for the following Tuesday, and Sarah knew that it was now or never. If she wanted to fight for Max's place at school, she had to stand up, not just for Tommy, but for everything she had fought for since Mark's disappearance. The world wasn't going to change for her. She had to change it. The day of the meeting arrived, and Sarah found herself sitting in the back of the conference room, her heart pounding in her chest. She was surrounded by a sea of disapproving faces, some familiar, some new, but all of them united in their belief that Max didn't belong. I want to start by saying that we are not here to discuss the merits of this dog's service, Principal Andrews began, her voice cold and controlled. We are here to discuss the safety and well-being of all our students. This dog's presence is disruptive, and we have to think about the greater good. Greater good. The words burned in Sarah's ears. She stood, her legs shaking but her voice clear. What is the greater good, then? Is it keeping things the way they've always been? Is it ignoring the lives that are changing because of Max? Or is the greater good about seeing the truth, that Max is helping my son? That he's helping other children too? I'm not asking for special treatment, but I am asking for fairness. There was a murmur of discomfort from the crowd. Sarah could see the doubt in their eyes, the unease at being called out for their prejudices. She didn't back down. I'm asking for the opportunity to continue doing what's best for my son, she said, her voice steady. And if that means allowing Max to stay, then I'm going to fight for that. A silence filled the room. The board members exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. But Sarah wasn't done. She knew she had to make them understand. She turned to Dr. Patricia Chin, who had been a constant ally in Tommy's recovery, and motioned for her to speak. Dr. Chin stood up, her presence commanding. The impact of Max on Tommy's life cannot be overstated. He's not just a dog. He's a trained service animal who has helped this child through severe emotional challenges. Without him, Tommy would not be the same child you see before you today. We've seen the difference firsthand. His anxiety has decreased. His social interactions have improved. Removing Max would be a setback, not just for Tommy, but for the other children who have benefited from his presence. Sarah watched as the board members absorbed Dr. Chin's words. But the resistance was still there. They wanted proof, more than what they had already seen. One by one, parents and teachers spoke, some in support of Max, others in opposition. The debate grew heated, but Sarah remained calm. She had fought so long for Tommy's peace, for Max's place in their world, and she wasn't about to let it slip away now. The meeting dragged on late into the night. It felt like an eternity before they finally called for a vote. When Principal Andrews spoke, her words were heavy with authority. We will vote now. Those in favor of removing Max from school grounds, please raise your hands. Sarah's heart thudded in her chest as hands slowly began to rise. The tension in the room felt unbearable. Then, a voice spoke up. I vote against removing the dog, said Mrs. Henderson, Tommy's teacher, her voice firm. I've seen firsthand how Max has helped our students. I've seen Sophie speak again. I've seen Aaron stop his panic attacks. Removing Max would do more harm than good. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The vote went on, and, in the end, the school board was deadlocked. The decision was postponed for further review. But Sarah knew this battle wasn't over. The fight for Max was just beginning, and there would be more meetings, more arguments, more resistance. Yet, in that moment, she felt a surge of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Tommy and Max's bond had sparked something bigger than the two of them. It had sparked a movement that was about to change Willow Creek forever. The morning after the school board meeting, Willow Creek awoke to an uneasy quiet. The vote on Max's future had been postponed, but the town was still buzzing with tension. It was clear that the battle wasn't over. No matter how much Sarah wanted to believe that things would calm down, she knew the storm was far from over. But for the first time, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, empowered. She had taken a stand for her son, for Max, and now, she wasn't going to let anyone take that away. Max had always been more than just a dog. He had become a symbol, a bridge between Tommy's world and the world around him. Where Tommy had once retreated into isolation, Max had led him into the light. Now, the dog who had once saved Tommy's life in the blizzard was saving more than just one child. He was helping an entire community find its way back to compassion. But not everyone in Willow Creek saw it that way. There were still those who saw Max as a threat, a disruption to their comfortable way of life. And for every person who saw the good in him, there were two more who feared what he represented: change. That afternoon, as Sarah walked home with Tommy and Max, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. It wasn't just about the dog. It was about the community about what it meant to stand up for something that felt right, even when the world pushed back. She glanced at Tommy, who walked beside Max, his hand resting gently on the dog's back. He was growing up, changing in ways she could hardly believe. His world, once so rigid, was now filled with possibilities. And Max had made all the difference. As they reached their apartment, Sarah paused. The weight of the fight ahead was still heavy on her shoulders. But there was something else, something stronger, pushing her forward. It was the same determination she had felt when she first became a mother. She would fight for Tommy's future. She would fight for Max's place in their world. The battle for Max's presence in the school didn't end that day. The legal paperwork, the public meetings, the whispers, these would continue. But Sarah no longer felt alone in the fight. She had the support of those who had seen what Max could do, and they weren't backing down. It wasn't long before news of Max's heroism spread beyond Willow Creek. Journalists, once skeptical of the program, began to cover the story in a different light. The same reporters who had once questioned the legitimacy of Max's role in the school were now writing about how the dog had saved a child's life. They chronicled the children who had found their voices through Max's quiet presence, the children who had learned empathy and compassion. The tide was turning, and Sarah felt the power of the truth working in her favor. The real turning point came when Robert Winchester, the wealthy developer who had once been one of Max's biggest critics, publicly admitted his mistake. It happened during an emergency school board meeting when the board was debating whether to continue funding the Pause for Peace program. "I was wrong," Robert said, his voice shaky but sincere. "I didn't see it first. I didn't understand what Max meant to this community. But I do now. That dog saved my son's life. He's not just a dog, he's a hero, and we should all be grateful for what he's done." With those words, the resistance began to crumble. One by one, people who had once fought against Max started to change their minds. It wasn't just about a dog anymore. It was about recognizing the good he had done, the healing he had brought to this fractured community. The school board, once so rigid in its stance, voted to reinstate Max into the school program. The decision was met with cheers from the supporters, but Sarah didn't celebrate. Not yet. The battle had been won, but the war wasn't over. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. Willow Creek began to heal. The divisions that had once torn the town apart started to fade as people came together to support Max and the program. Businesses that had once boycotted the Pause for Peace program now embraced it. The local ice cream parlor, which had once closed its doors to avoid controversy, reopened with a new initiative, Paws and Pals, a program that allowed children to read to service dogs. The library expanded its Read with Max program, and even the local school began to see the positive impact Max had on their students. And Tommy, who had once been lost in his patterns, began to thrive. He no longer felt like an outsider. He was the bridge between the children, between the school, and between the world. His classmates no longer saw him as the weird kid with no dad. They saw him for who he was, a bright, unique child with a gift for understanding the world in ways they hadn't yet learned to. One day after school, Sarah watched as Tommy and Max ran across the playground together. They were no longer an anomaly. They were a team. The other children joined in, their laughter filling the air, as Tommy led them in a game Max had taught him to play. It wasn't just a game, it was a victory. For all of them. As Sarah stood there, watching her son and Max, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Max hadn't just saved her son's life. He had saved her too. He had shown her what it meant to fight, to stand tall, and to never back down, even when the world seemed determined to knock you down. Max had been her reminder that love, loyalty, and friendship could change the world. "Max brought us home," Tommy whispered one evening, his voice filled with wonder. "Just like in a snowstorm." Sarah smiled, her heart full. "Yes, sweetheart, he did." And with that, Sarah understood. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a reminder that sometimes the greatest heroes come in the most unexpected forms. And when you open your heart to change, healing follows. The world may not always make sense, but with love and loyalty, we can find our way home. Max's journey has been nothing short of transformative. For Tommy, for Sarah, and for the entire town of Willow Creek. The power of a dog's loyalty, love, and protection has shown how even the most fractured communities can heal when they open their hearts. The lesson here is simple. We are all capable of change, and sometimes it takes a quiet hero to lead us there. What do you think of Max's story? How has a dog or animal made an impact on your life? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the HeartForce channel for more inspiring tales of love, loyalty, and change.